Snow had a way of swallowing sound in the valley that winter, turning every breath into a ghost that drifted upward and vanished. Alana pressed her back against the rough barn wall, arms around herself, her blanket stiff with frost. She had run, so far her footprints were already disappearing behind her. The cold bit into her bones, sharp and certain as the memory of every voice that had told her she wasn't wanted. A gust shook the boards. Something creaked. She held her breath. Footsteps crunched outside, slow, measured, carrying no anger, yet no hesitation. Light spilled in as the barn door slid open, revealing a tall cowboy framed by the swirling snow. He didn't reach for his gun. He didn't bark a command. He simply stood there a moment, letting the warmth of his breath mix with the cold air. "You'll freeze in here," he said softly. "Get your things and come with me." Alana didn't move. Too many men had spoken with gentleness only to use it as a mask. She lifted her chin in a quiet defense, as if that alone could shield her from another blow. The cowboy noticed, but didn't step closer. Instead, he removed his coat and set it on a bale of hay, backing away as if to prove the space was hers. "My name's Rhett Morgan," he added. "I ain't here to hurt you." She studied his face, trying to decide whether survival meant trusting him or keeping to the shadows. The storm had worsened. She could barely feel her toes. After a long silence, she lowered her gaze and whispered, "Why help me?"
Rhett answered with the same calm stillness he entered with. "Because someone should have helped you a long time ago." The shirt on her back felt suddenly thin. Against her will, something inside her loosened. Not trust, not yet, but a softening. Enough to gather the few things she had, a small pouch, the blanket she'd slept under, a beaded charm her grandmother had made long ago. She hesitated again at the barn door, but he didn't push. He simply stood in the snow, letting her choose. Outside, the wind cut across the open field. Rhett lifted her onto his horse with care, keeping his touch light, respectful. The town of Elder Creek waited down the road like a cluster of lanterns peeking through white darkness. In that glow lived all the judgment she'd run from, whispers about her blood, her poverty, the way she kept to herself. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes, blurring the world as they rode. When they reached the general store, townsfolk paused mid-step. Men muttered things they thought could not be overheard. Women watched her with the tight smiles of people who enjoy feeling superior. "Another stray he picked up?" someone whispered. "Won't last with him." None of them do. Alana felt the words like sleet on bare skin. She tried to will herself small, invisible. But Rhett stepped subtly ahead of her, not shielding in a showy way, just positioning himself where the coldest stares would land on him first. His steadiness made her realize how long she had been bracing for cruelty. Rhett purchased extra blankets, dried meat, and a small tin of salve for frostbite. He paid without haggling, nodding once to the shopkeeper who avoided meeting his eyes. Alana wondered what kind of life turned a man into someone who carried both solitude and dignity with equal weight. They rode out of town as the clouds thickened. The path toward the mountains narrowed quickly, forcing the horse to slow. Snow gathered in the folds of Alana's borrowed coat, yet she felt warmer than she had in days. Rhett asked only simple things. If she could feel her fingers, if the wind bothered her, if she needed to stop and rest. She answered softly, trying to keep her voice steady against the ache of leftover fear. Halfway up the trail, the horse slipped slightly on the ice. Instinct drove her to grasp Rhett's coat to keep from falling. The contact startled them both, but he didn't pull away. He only glanced back with a small nod, as if to say he understood fear better than he let on. For a few heartbeats, the sound of hooves, wind, and shared breath became a thin but fragile thread between two lonely souls. By the time they reached his cabin, the storm had grown wild. The structure was small but sturdy, made of hand-hewn logs, its roof crowned with snow like a white, slumbering beast. Light glowed from the windows. When he opened the door for her, warmth rushed out, carrying the scent of cedar and old stories. She stepped inside and froze, not from cold, but from surprise. The room felt lived in, but gently. A carved wooden chair near the fireplace. A blanket folded with care. Boots placed neatly by the hearth. Alana had never seen a home that looked like someone built it on purpose, not from obligation. Rhett placed another log on the fire. Sparks rose, painting his face in shifting gold. "You can warm up by the hearth," he said. "Take your time." Alana held her hands toward the flames until feeling returned in painful little sparks. Slowly, words began to slip out, hesitant at first, then clearer. She told him pieces of her story, never lingering too long on any one wound. She described how the ranch owner withheld wages, called her ungrateful when she asked for food, accused her of stealing heat by sleeping near the stove. She spoke of being chased out in the night when she refused to endure more. Rhett didn't interrupt. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "You didn't deserve any of that," he said. "And you won't face it alone tonight." There was no pity in his tone, only recognition, and something that felt like quiet anger on her behalf. It unsettled her in a different way. Mercy was easier to distrust. Respect, that was something rarer. He made her a bowl of stew and set an extra blanket near the fire. He offered his sister's old coat, folded carefully, its stitching worn but strong. Alana touched the fabric and wondered why a man would keep something for years unless the memory attached to it mattered. As she settled in, Rhett spoke for the first time about his own past. A wife lost to fever 5 winters ago. A cabin built for a family that never came to be. A man who filled silence with work so he wouldn't drown in it. The fire crackled beside them, and his voice grew softer, as if speaking the truth lifted a burden from his chest. Outside, the storm pressed against the windows, but inside, the air felt different, still lonely, yes, but shared. A sudden howl shattered the calm. Rhett's head snapped up. Another howl followed, closer this time, too sharp to ignore. The horses in the shed cried out. He grabbed his rifle quickly. "Stay inside," he said. But fear didn't glue Alana where she stood. Instead, she followed him to the door, stopping only when the cold slapped her face. Wolves circled the shed, shadows shifting in the blinding snow. One lunged toward the wooden boards. Rhett fired into the air, but ice under his boot made him slip. The rifle skidded away, lost in the snow. Another wolf charged. Without allowing herself to think, Alana ran back to the fire pit he'd built outside earlier and seized a burning piece of wood. Heat licked her wrist, but she didn't let go. She rushed forward just as the wolf neared him. The flame carved a sharp arc through the air, startling the animal long enough for it to retreat. Rhett pushed himself to his feet, stunned. The wolves pulled back, retreating into the white dark, swallowed by the storm. Alana's breath came in painful bursts. She trembled but held the burning wood like a torch aching to protect the only safe place she'd found in years. Rhett stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching a wild creature in pain. "You shouldn't have come out," he murmured, but the words carried awe rather than reprimand. "I wasn't going to let them take you," she whispered. His hand lifted, hesitant, open, hovering near her cheek, asking permission without words. She leaned toward him, not for warmth, but for something she couldn't name. He didn't touch her, yet the space between them felt changed, charged with a fragile promise neither dared speak aloud. Inside the cabin again, he tended her trembling hands, careful as though they were made of something precious. She met his gaze and said, "You saved my life." Rhett shook his head softly. "Tonight we saved each other." The fire glowed brighter, filling the room with a peace that felt earned. Outside, the storm finally began to break, leaving the world washed clean. Inside, 2 weary souls sat close to the same fire, warmed by something the cold could not touch. And though dawn had not yet come, Alana felt the first quiet certainty of hope, one she hadn't allowed herself in years. The night had given her a choice, and the choice had guided her here, to a stranger who felt strangely like a beginning. The future waited beyond the mountains, but for the first time, she didn't fear walking toward it.